All right, today we are going to cover Seaborn. So previously we worked with Matplotlib and we saw how we can make plots with that. So Matplotlib is kind of a very clunky library. You know, you have to write a large number of lines of code in order to get it to do what you want. It's not a very pretty library, so a lot of the default colors that are used are not aesthetically very pleasing. And it doesn't work very well with other libraries, such as pandas. And so now we're going to cover Seaborn. So Seaborn is built on top of Matplotlib, so it uses Matplotlib, but it has a large number of what's commonly called sugars. And these sugars allow you to kind of combine lots of Matplotlib functions in order to make plots with very minimal numbers of code. So these plots almost always look very nice. They are much more advanced types of plots, and it does not take a lot of work at all in order to make them. So install Seaborn if you haven't. So just kind of install Seaborn, and you'll be able to get this library onto your computer. So I've already installed this on my computer, and we are just going to kind of follow this example script just so you can see a lot of different types of graphs that you can create pretty easily. So importing Seaborn. So we actually don't need to import pandas. So import Seaborn. So typically the way you do that is, actually I guess I haven't installed this. So typically the way you do this is that you import Seaborn and then you rename it as SNS is kind of the common way that it's named. And then since it's built on top of Matplotlib, you also have to import plot again, and this is just in order to show the graph at the end. So Seaborn is installing some libraries that are necessary, but what we are going to use for example data is data that is built into the Seaborn library. So this first line of code just allows us to load data that's part of this library. So we're going in to Python now, the interpreter. We import Seaborn into our interpreter. It takes a little bit of while to load, so don't be concerned if it doesn't, if it takes a little while. And I'm getting a font warning, which I'm just going to ignore for now. And then we import Python, Matplotlib as well. And so the first line of code, this just brings us example data that we can use to plot. And it's a very simple, so whenever you're looking at something for the first time, it's always important to do type, and we've seen data frames before. So this is just a pandas data frame that we can use. And so you can see the table is pretty simple. So there is an index, which is just a numerical indexed from 0 to 43. So there's 44 rows of this table. And then there are 3 columns. So there's something called data set, there's an X value, and then a Y value as well. So these are some sort of observational data that has been collected. And so the first type of figure that we are going to create is just a simple scatter plot. And so we have created a scatter plot, and if you want to see what a scatter plot looks like, you can just copy and paste the type of plot. So this is an example gallery right here. So these are all the different types of plots that you can make with Seaborn. So there's really a rich set of different types of plots that you can make, and then there's kind of example data within here of how you can make these. So we're making a scatter plot here, so this just needs some sort of X value and Y value, and then it plots a large number of points with that. So what we have done is, and this is kind of how most of these plotting functions work for Seaborn, is that it requires some sort of data frame object, and that is stored as data. So if we go to the API for that, right here, data is some sort of like pandas data frame. And it is also, you can also actually take NumPy and arrays as well, but it's some sort of input data structure. So this is where the data is held within it. And if we want to create a scatter plot, we have to specify which we want to be X data and which one we want to be Y data. So this, we're giving the names of the columns. So we've also used this X argument and the Y argument. And so these are the names of the columns in the pandas data frame that we want to use. So these columns don't have to be named X and Y. They can be named anything that you like. You just have to specify it so it knows and says, okay, this is where all of the X data is. This is where all the Y data is. And I'm just going to ignore the data in the data set column. So now we plot show. And so we have this beautiful, semi-beautiful data right here. So we have a scatter plot. Every single row is a point, and we can see it in both the X and Y directions. As a second example, we're going to create a line plot. So the arguments are the same. We give it the data table. We tell it we want the X value to be and the Y value be. And so now we show it. And so now, instead of a scatter plot, it shows a line. And so what's cool about this is that it did a lot of things it did a lot of the data analysis already, and so we didn't have to do that. So what do I mean by that? So now, instead of showing every single point, at every single point we're showing the mean of it. So when we looked at the scatter plot, so let's take a really quick look at this data again. At the scatter plot, we notice that there's a lot of different points at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So each X value has a large number of different points. And so what this line plot has done is it's averaged those points together, and it's also calculated error bars and kind of given us a range of data at all these different points. So you notice this point right here doesn't have any sort of error bar or kind of shaded around it, and that's because there's only a single point at 19. So this is the only point that has an X value of 19, and so that's why it's not there. All right, finally, using this data, we're also going to show an LM plot. And this is a very useful plot that I use all the time. So this is a scatter plot, so we can see all of the different data points, but now we can also see a regression line. So this is a regression line that is fit to this data. So very often in data analysis, we often want to fit a regression line, and so we're able to do that automatically and kind of see what the slope of the line is. And then we can also see kind of the confidence bounds based upon that in the shaded area right there. So very useful library. We were able to do a regression line. We didn't have to do any of the NumPy functions or find some sort of regression library that could do that for you. So all of that was built into Seaborn. One final thing we'll look at is what's called a joint plot, and this is a 2D histogram of the data. And so this is one final additional way to visualize this. And so instead of showing a scatter plot of all of the data, we're showing a heat map. So we've basically grouped all of the values. So the shade or the depth of the color indicates how many of those points fall within that region. So you can see this hexagon right here, and I specified it to be a hexagon. This point right here contains a large number of the data points. And we also see the histogram. This is the range of Y values. So we see that most of the Y values, or the mean of the Y values, are centered around 8, and that's the mode as well. For the X values, those are centered around 7, and then that's the mode as well. So these are 4 different examples of plots, and next we will get into hue after this.